Greetings! It is I, Tantasnare Van Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the Pathfinder role-playing game system. Today we're going to start with a new topic. Leaving off from where we left off, we're talking about NPCs today. So, every other figure, character, everything else that's not a player within the worlds you're going to be playing in is going to be a non-player character, or an NPC, and is going to be controlled by your game master. They're going to, of course, build them, control them, edit them, use them as they need fit. Every detail about them and every action they make are GM controlled. Now, beyond an NPC having one of the normal PC classes, there are also 5 NPC classes, which are an option for a game master to use for the various NPCs they're playing. The Adept is basically a type of divine spellcaster that comes from a list of spells that is a reflection of both, generally speaking, similar to wizard and cleric spells combined. So it has a little bit of both of those, but it's a divine caster. An aristocrat is just that. They have some okay abilities, no general special abilities, but they're an aristocrat, usually have a little bit more money. A commoner is just that. They tend to be very weak, have very little abilities, be very terrible in everything they actually do if it comes to combat, but in general, they do what they need to do. They're commoners. Experts are skilled people. They're either skilled traders, skilled craftsmen, anybody that has a lot of skill and needs to use it in whatever profession they have is going to tend to be an expert. A warrior is effectively a lesser fighter. It's someone that's not only not as good as an actual fighter, they don't get the same amount of feats and such, but they do tend to have a little bit of combat ability and should be able to use it. Now let's talk about creating your own vibrant NPCs to use in your world, because you're going to want to develop them, going over a number of quick steps that'll make it easier to build. These are the figures that you're either going to fight, or you might have to rely on them for their own skills or abilities to help supplement what you can do. It's going to depend on that for when you're building it. So the first step, of course, is going to be your basic concept of this NPC. This is class, this is race, this is a little bit of hints of its personality, building everything together, just the basics of what this character is. We're starting out really simple here. You know, class and race define a lot, but then if you come up with a few ideas based around that, it's going to push you in the direction for when you're developing the next couple of steps. You're going to have to know, is it's a big dwarven brute, or if it's someone that's a little like thinner than your average dwarf, if we're talking about a dwarven fighter, that might be a little lift, maybe use dexterity. You see, we're already describing things differently. That's why the next step is, of course, ability scores. Now, ability scores, you're going to have 2 different choices here. First off, you're going to have to look, the choice is, there's 2 systems you can use. One system, you first look at the type of NPC you're doing. Is it a PC character, PC class, or is it an NPC class? One of these ones I mentioned just a minute ago. Depending on these, depends on the ability scores you get. There are normal ability scores, which will give you 6, or heroic NPC scores if you're using a PC class. You will choose, of course, the one that is appropriate to the class you've chosen, and you will arrange them as you wish. Now, this isn't the only option for doing ability scores, as I was trying to explain here. This is just the basic one, if you want to arrange them as is. But you can also look to the role that your character's taking within this NPC is taking, what type of NPC it is. There are 5 different effective roles: ranged combatant, melee combatant, arcane caster, divine caster, skilled. Depending on the one you choose, it will give you an array of ability scores dependent on that. Of course, you can tweak them a little bit if you think as appropriate, maybe switching something here or there, but this will give you a general idea and speed things up. So it's saying if I'm having more of a ranged type one, who's going to use dexterity, then hey, I'm ready for it right away. I know it's ranged heroics or ranged common. There we go, I've gotten it, I can throw it in here. Next up, we have to do your character's skills. Now, of course, you can do skills just as normal as you can do with a PC, but we can speed this up also. We can make it simpler for you. Let's give, for example, you have your class. You figure out that your class normally gets 2+ intelligence modifier every level of skill points. What you do is you look to whatever that is, the blank plus intelligence modifier, and that's the max ranks and a number of skills you choose for your class, appropriate out of class skills it has. So if you have 5 possible skills that you can choose from, and then you can go to that skill list, choose them, you have max ranks in them, bam, you're done. Easy as that. And you can look at, there is a chart that is provided that for each class, an NPC class, you can quickly look at it and determine this. On the other hand, your NPC might have more than one class. We can still deal with this chart here. If we're going back to the normal one, you're doing it normal rules. You know, you're doing the points per level. This one here, whatever class has a smaller amount of skills, either if it's 2, if one of them's 2 plus intelligence, the other's 4 plus intelligence, you use the 2 plus intelligence to determine the max ranks you have in a bunch of skills. Then you subtract the difference between these two, which in this case, of course, would be 2. 4 plus intelligence minus 2 plus intelligence is going to equal 2. For 2 more skills, you have ranks in those equal to your class, which had the higher amount of skill points. So the 4 plus intelligence skill class, you choose 2 more skills from that one to have ranks equal to that levels that you have in that one. So you see how we've determined that we have this difference between them, but it works out fine. When you hit 3 classes, we're going back to the way you're doing it with all the other PCs. We're just defaulting back to that. You can't really do this form if you have 3 or more classes on an NPC, which is rare, but it might happen. All right, let's talk about feats. Because just like a character, your NPC gets feats per level. That's another thing. Your NPC gets stuff for levels up just like a PC. They get ability scores up every 4 levels. They, of course, get feats every odd level. They get that one at first level. So you can see that they have a progression system for both ability scores and feats, just like a PC. Now, when we talk about feats, it's like, now we know we're getting a number of them. We have our level. We've determined the amount we get. Let's choose what we get. The book provides groups of feats. These will help you narrow it down. You look to whatever you feel is appropriate as a group to your NPC, and you take feats from this group. This means out of all the feats, I'm instead narrowing it down to one of these groups, and then plucking them out of that group, which is far less than I would have had if I was looking at every feat. Now, if you feel like there's one that's specially important to your NPC, then go ahead and give it to them. But this is going to ease the ability for you to choose them. It speeds things up. After this, we look to your class on racial features, all the other special features of it. Again, you know, for your ability scores, you added in your racial ability scores after everything was said and done because you have your race, but you might have racial abilities. This is when you're going to list them. There's also when you list class abilities. And most of those are straightforward. Spells, on the other hand, are going to be the more complex portion of this. Spells, you're going to have to choose them. An easy way to do this is if you're using a basic template of NPCs, is for the upper 2 levels of spells, keep those a little variable. Anything lower than that for your basic template you're coming up with, keep it standard. And as your NPCs grow with your players, you can have this. You can just come up with some standards and have a little bit of flexibility at the top end. Basically, if you come up with a standard list from 1 to 7, you can assign it to any NPC. And you have to remember, though, those top 2 levels are going to be your variables where you will spend your time choosing them. So if it gets 9th level spells, you're choosing the 8th or 9th. Anything less than that, you may not be using that. So if it can only cast 1st level spells, choose your 1st level spells. It's not that difficult to do 1 level of spell. Same with 2nd level spells. As soon as you hit that 3rd level, use your basic list for 1st level spells. And you can see how this makes it a lot easier. We've sped it up again. Let's talk about gear. Gear is a big thing for your NPCs. Now, depending on the type of NPC you have, you might only be having this NPC show up once. Just give it a couple basic things, call it a day. If it's a reoccurring NPC, then of course you want to fully stat out its gear. These are important things to note too, is how often, how much is this NPC going to show up. Now you're going to have to look, there's a chart, based upon level, and based upon if it's a common NPC or heroic NPC. These factors, heroic or common, and level, will determine the amount of money your NPC gets. This chart will also break down each of these into components. There are a number of components your NPC will have. Weapon. What kind of weapon it's using. Protection. This is bonuses to AC and saves or anything of the similar. Magic items, if it has any kind of special magic items that are reusable. Limited use items. This is potions, scrolls, wands, certain wondrous items which can only be used once. And then normal gear, non-magical gear. These are the categories that it will split that original amount of money in between. You of course go from the left side of the chart to the right side of the chart. You're going to want to look at the weapons first. Spend your money. Any leftovers goes to protection. Spend your money. Any leftovers, any leftovers, any leftovers, and any leftovers, all the way to the end. And whatever remaining money is left over becomes coins and gems that NPC has on them, an amount of money that they have. So we have now broken down the equipment of your NPC, but there's other factors that we have to look at. We've broken it down that we know how much we're giving them. We might edit this. If you're playing a fast experience game, add 1 level to your NPCs to determine the amount of gold they get. Slow experience, subtract 1. If you're using high fantasy, whatever amount of money they would have, double it. If you're using low fantasy, half that amount. So you can see the type of campaign you're doing and the speed of experience will edit the amount of money that your NPCs will be gaining. Some of them, like a high fantasy fast game, are going to have a huge amount of money when it comes to it. They're going to be considered a level higher for their money and have twice the amount they normally would. They're going to have huge amounts of gear in comparison to, of course, slow game at low fantasy. They're dropping it down a lot. Last thing you're going to do, calculations and details. Calculate AC, calculate initiative, calculate saves, calculate HP, calculate everything you need to know. Come up with an alignment, come up with some more traits about it. You had those basic traits, fill in some personality traits, and guess what? You've built yourself an NPC. We've gone over some quick steps for it, but you've finished it up. Now there is a sample NPC in the book you can look at, or there are other materials that provide sample NPCs if you want to look at them and get an idea of how to build one. But that's it for today. I introduced you to making an NPC. I talked all about it. I talked about, of course, the 5 NPC classes you can have. The Adept, the Aristocrat, the Commoner, the Expert, and the Warrior. And I went over the steps you will need to build your NPC, similar to steps that you would take for your character. But they have all their own essence to them, from choosing your ability scores, your skills, your feats, class features like spells, to moving on to things like your gear. And finally, those finishing touches, where you complete your NPCs. Now, a lot of these steps have ways of speeding it up, so that if you're making just a one-time, one-shot NPC that's showing up really quickly, there you go, you've got it, you're ready. And some of these NPCs you don't need to do as much for, because each step you look at it and you say, what do I need for what this character is going to do? That's what you're going to ask yourself. What do I need? In the next episode, we're diving into magic items, though. We're going to start talking about the basics of them and start going into details about the different types of magic items. But regardless, if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It's just support the channel, the Empire, for the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link description below. But until the next time, I bid you farewell.